All right, I'm on no sleep. We've been doing a hackathon recently, and I've been coding quite a bit, not only at work, but after hours. And I figured what I would talk about is a way that we can maybe organize agents that's a little bit less of a lift than Gastown. So if you're at the point now where you're running teams of agents, agent teams within Claude, or you're trying to divvy out tasks to multiple agents, or maybe even you've got not just one spec, but multiple specs for work that you want done, that you could perhaps use a hand with overnight. I think I've got a tool for you. The license is AGPL, not
Okay.
necessarily a bad thing, but if in case you want to fork it or what have you,
Mhm.
what I've been looking at lately is Auto Claude.
Okay.
Now, I didn't want to cover it right away because one, in the name, I'm sure you know a little bit about the Claude bot renaming fiasco, for example. So I had assumed the name would change. Also, I wasn't sure if the license was going to be there to stay because there were some stipulations further on. But I think what they're looking for is sponsors for the repo, which I think is totally fine at this point in time.
Mm.
Furthermore, Claude, I think, at least in terms of Claude code, Anthropic was trying to restrict the way that people were using OAuth tokens in order to run multiple Claude agents or Claude Code agents, pardon me. And as a result, this app wasn't great. It was a little bit buggy essentially while they're going through those growing pains. But as of about 4 days ago, you can see that there was a new release here. But the way that Claude Code runs within AutoClaude is a lot better at this point in time, and there's way less bugs. So prior to this, you had to reauth maybe once every 2, 3 hours. It wasn't the end of the world, but if you're asleep, it's difficult to reauth, and you want to do it securely as well. So you don't want to just hard code an API key or what have you. So all this to say, this is AutoClaude. And what it is a way to essentially take tasks and divvy them up amongst agents. Now I'm gonna, go in on this full screen here so we can have a look at it. So imagine a Kanban board. So a way of looking at your tasks in terms of what stage they're in. So if you got a task in planning and progress, I realize this is small here. I'll swap to the real app in a moment here. But if you've got all these apps in the real app, if you've got all these plans in the real app, what you can do is look at these bars. So we've got in progress, one that's new or might be a little bit different. So if we go all the way back, we got planning, your queue. So of course, if you've got many tasks that you want to look at or many specs that you're working on, you also got in progress, AI review, which is probably new for most people in terms of a Kanban board, and human review. I think normally there'd just be an in review section, and then done as well as some archive. So it's a standard Kanban board. There's a couple steps in there that are a little bit different in terms of AI review or human review. Also, when you click into one of these cards here, I don't have any I think that are broken right now. Oh, here's one. Perfect. So these broken ones as well, you can go into and hit check for conflicts, which is pretty handy, but also you can have AI review these as well, which is actually quite nice. Again, this is just a test repo that I've got. That please don't fork it. It's just a bunch of like AI slop essentially, but I'm just using it as a test to go through things. Now, one thing that I thought was pretty cool about AutoClaude is that it actually supports work trees. So if we go into here, sometimes this can be a little bit of a pain to manage on your own. Now, this theme is not the default theme as well. I'll show you in a second. This is the quote unquote Datadog theme that I've been using, some more purple and pink. But as we look through these work trees, you can actually see what's going on in them. And generally on your file system, this is going to be just a folder. But it's a little bit difficult to visualize in typical Git tools. They're not really made for it. So I felt like one of these, the work trees feature is really handy to be able to show you what's going on at the very least. And the other is being able to see that Kanban board. But furthermore, what you can do is go through and do things like ideation. Now, I'm not a big fan of this word. Let's assume it's brainstorming. But when we're coming up with ideas for your actual app, what you can do here is just hit refresh or add more. Now, I'm going to hit refresh because I've got these all configured. So I can go through and say, hey, we want code improvements, UX, UI improvements, that kind of thing. In this case, I'm actually just concerned about security. So I'm going to uncheck everything else. And again, you can tell that this is like one of those vibe coded apps. It's got the same sort of theme that a lot of Claude Code apps have. Neither here nor there, but it does have that feel to it, which is nice. But if we go through and hit refresh here, what this will do is actually look at my repo and figure out what security things need to be done. And then I can choose what happens and what doesn't. This will take a little minute here, but when we look at our Kanban board, I can show you where these go. So they land in planning, which is really nice. And then you can click in here and look at what you're going to do. And if you don't like the task, you can delete it. Or if you feel like you need to add to it, you can do that as well. Furthermore, as you're going through here, when we're looking at tasks that are live, we can actually look at subtasks, logs, and files, which I will do here for one of these that's working. So this one is in progress. And you can see, so what happened was it vibe coded a Rust file that's really big. So it's like a HTTP API RS. It's a massive, I think it's 8,000 line code. And it's trying to split that up. So what we can do is look at the progress. So it says it's 10% done. But also in here, we can see what it's currently doing. And a lot of these are just markdown file steps that they're going through, but we can look at what those are. These are the subtasks. Again, very similar to Gastown in terms of the way that we're sending out tasks or different levels of tasks in terms of what we're doing, but we can also define what those steps do in markdown files, which is very handy. So imagine a bunch of different AI quote unquote personas or agent personas, or maybe tasks with like a cleanup at the end so we can see what's going on here. And these were all divvied out and assigned to different personas prior to working on the task. And then once the job started going through it, you can see that there was a planning. So there were 78 steps in planning. And for coding, we're at 323 steps. Now, fear not, these aren't actual coding steps. It's mostly like every tool call is considered a step. Every output from the agent is a step. Any question that was proposed and answer would be another step. So these, it looks like a lot of steps, but it's probably maybe tenfold smaller than this, so maybe about 30 actual steps. And then at the end, what I really liked was the validation. Just because some Gen AI bot has said that it's done something doesn't mean that it's really done. Now, I'm glad you saw this bug that's come up. So this is one of the bugs that happens in AutoClaude. It's not insurmountable. It's pretty easy. Generally, what you have to do is recover and restart tasks, and this typically happens if your auth has expired. I kind of figured it had overnight when I came in, which is fine. At least it's not the 2-3 hours, but this is kind of handy, and you can actually hit recover task, and it will in fact recover the task, which is nice. Now, furthermore, if there's anything wrong with any of these tasks that are done, so if they go under, we were talking about these ones that have errors, since they're work trees, what you could actually do is grab this work tree location that we were looking at before, and you can actually assign an AI agent to it in case it gets stuck or what have you, which is what you had to do with the last version because things would get stuck all the time. Now, I've only done an overview of the things that are handy for me, but there's a lot in here. So I think the biggest aha moment, and it's not just this app, but in terms of others as well, is that Kanban board approach. And I think maybe more interesting would be like a GitHub Kanban board at like a link or synchronous, or maybe in linear or Jira or what have you. I think that would be interesting to me because I don't want another issue tracker if I've already got one, essentially. But neither here nor there. When we go into here into A for agent terminals, what you can do is actually multiplex multiple terminals, which is pretty good. So you can see there's 12 of them here. We can actually swap through them if we want to. We can set up different terminals if we want, and we can just hit new terminal here. See how they multiplex on their own. If I hit a third, it doesn't do it on the side, but it does on the bottom, which is really nice. So you can get up to 4 right away. So if you're already at the stage now where you're running multiple agents in terminals together, like a 4-up or a 6-up, this might be handy for you. I've zoomed into the UI, so it looks like you wouldn't be able to do that many, but at 4K, you could probably handle 8 of these in one window, which is pretty handy. The next is insights. So as we're going through our code base, we can actually start asking the model questions about our code base. Or we could say, like, what was this feature that we just landed? Or why did we just land this feature? Or walk me through the steps for the decision that got us here. Were there other libraries that we could use? How's the security, etc.? So if you want to inspect as we're going along, we can do that as well. And this one is kind of like planning or strategy. It's like one of those S words, basically. But if you want to generate a roadmap for where your app should go, you can. The only thing I caution here is that I find Claude is very interested in making a profit. I guess it's very interested in making whatever you're doing into some $1 million, $1 billion idea with VCs and all that stuff, which is fantastic. However, if you're working on open source, it's not that great. So I would say when you're creating your roadmap, maybe prompt it a little bit that's an open source community build, hackathon project, or what have you, something that's not for profit, something that you're not putting. I mean, if you are, that's totally fine. But by default, it will try to essentially give you a roadmap to creating a profitable product or project, which is not what we want. So we got to prompt it a little bit better. All right, so we went through ideation. The change log will tell us what's done, what's completed, and we can go through it. So if you come back to this like a week later and it's still running and you want to know what's happened, you can go in here. And then, of course, as we go through the context, we can start defining services. Now, I don't have this set up, but you could also use a RAG server. So essentially a retrieval augmented generation. You can create a database of all of your code and all the things that you're doing, and then refer to that as you're generating new ideas. Okay, we're almost done. I'm so sorry. The MCP overview here is pretty big, but let's just talk about some of the things that are bolted on. So the first thing I turned off was context 7 because I'm so sorry. It's just really not handy for me to look up the data.docs in context 7. Personally, I know it's got use. I know there's people out there using it. I have yet to find it useful for me personally. The rag that I was talking about is actually graffiti memory. You can turn this on. It does have overhead, and personally, I didn't find it was that useful. It seemed to make things a little bit slower. The other is linear, and I think here is maybe where there might be some utility in having the Kanban board linked to an issue tracker that's outside of this app is probably handy. And then further down, we've got Electron. So if we're testing like an app that is essentially it's something that pushes a web UI as an app on your desktop, this can test that for you, as well as Puppeteer. If you're doing a web front end for that app, you can test it as well. Now, AutoCloud tools are a bunch of MCP servers that are built into AutoCloud that you could split out if you wanted, but that allow you to go through those steps that we were talking about. And they're typically backed by Markdown files. And then under here, you can add custom servers if you want to. Sequential Thinking is one that I use quite a bit. And then under here, when we were talking about that spec creation, we can define what models we want for each of these steps. I've got it primarily set to Sonnet 4.5, just because I found the bill for Opus 4.6 crept up pretty quickly as you're going through all of these steps. And it's not that one is better than the other for these steps because we split it up into smaller steps. But I think if you want to ask these big questions without the smaller steps, you would probably need Opus actually to come up with that S word strategy to get you through like your next 5 or 10-year plan to a profitable company or what have you. All right, underneath here on build, you can see if there are some MCPs for these. And again, we're using Sonnet 4.5. And then there's some utility and ideation as well. You can see that most of these are set to Sonnet. Some are set to Haiku for the really easy ones, like a commit message, come up with a commit message for me. There's no reason to use Opus for those smaller tasks, I think. And then furthermore, under ideation, or brainstorming, these are mostly set to Opus. So I think I've gone through most of it. Before I end, I'm just going to go back to my apologies, the appearance, and we'll show you that it can in fact look a little bit different than this. So we're set to Neo right now, and this is the default. I just felt like the purple demoed a little bit better in terms of contrast for a theme like this. And then lastly, there's the sponsor us button. So this is new in the new version, but this is kind of what I was talking about in terms of the license. So if we were to look at the license on the bottom of the page here, my apologies. So way down here at the license. Kind of interesting is that it's AGPL 3, but also commercial licensing available for closed source use cases. I think this will probably go away, and then they'll say, hey, sponsor us if you can, kind of thing, which is the only thing that I thought was a little bit weird in the license. And they're absolutely within their rights to make money, of course. And I feel like perhaps Claude has steered them down this path, as I mentioned, when you go into the brainstorming and planning. So all this to say, AutoCloud is a very easy way to, at the very least, manage multiple terminals. It can also do Kanban-born planning, ideation, and roadmaps, which I think is a little bit different than other tools that we've looked at. There are other Kanban tools in the command line, for example, that you could use, or GUIs. I felt this one was actually really good because it allows you to recover from things that have gone a little bit awry. And I think that's because there were some bugs in the code earlier, basically. So that was a necessity. And as a result, the app is a lot more easy to use. So you can actually inspect those sessions as well as recover them if you need to. Sorry, really quick intro to a tool that I think is pretty handy, but this is what I've been using for the past 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, very interesting. So it seems like you mentioned Gastown. Seems like maybe a little safer alternative in some ways, has some more guardrails. Obviously, it's got an interface that might be a little bit more approachable to some folks. But does it feel like an evolution on anything from Gastown, or did just Gastown feel like that's just the direction we're heading, and this is just another example of that kind of iteration of that?
I think all of that, basically. This feels like it might be one step just before Gastown if we're going to look at Steve Yeag's. I think the different stages of AI development. This might be stage 7, where Steve is probably trying to get to age 8. So this is some orchestration, but checking in on agents here and there is where this, I think I would put it, which is fine. It might be that I'm more comfortable with this method than the hands-off approach, just watching GitHub PRs. Because sometimes I feel like API keys leak, or maybe the apps will get a little bit too far down a path that I don't want in Gastown. It's nice to be able to hit the stop button, readjust, steer, ground a little bit, and then continue on, as opposed to the fully automated gas town behemoth, honestly, that uses quite a few tokens and will often give you results, but maybe not the ones that you want.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. Well, Ryan, appreciate you taking the time to step through that and share that with us. And we will see you at the next one.
All right. Hopefully, I can get some sleep. Have a good one.
Bye.